Hello, welcome to the Observation Lounge, episode 2. It is Sunday, July 5th, 2015, and America is 1 year older. Not that anybody really cares. My name is Charlie Plaine, MidnightLich on the forums, and as I said, this is the Observation Lounge, the podcast, Google Hangout, where we talk about community issues. Kind of a light attendance week again, but Chris, why don't you introduce yourself to everybody and let them know who you are on the forums?
Okay, I'm Chris, Mailways on the forums. I do programming stuff and I message board admin, and I used to be the message board moderator, which is sort of why I'm here now, I guess. So we can talk about any of that stuff. Any questions people have about it?
Yes, the special topic of the day was meant to be forum moderation and code of conduct. If you were watching live, you can join the panel. The link is in the chat room, which is at trekcc.org. You can tweet at us at trekcc, or you can post on our Facebook page, all of which I am monitoring. So if you have questions or concerns about forum moderation, the code of conduct, or anything, any topic really, please let us know, and we'll talk about it. In the meantime, before we jump into the moderation stuff, let's kind of talk about what's gone on in the world of Trek CC for the last month or so, 3 weeks since the last episode. I think most notably was the release of Lower Decks. Have you had the chance to look at Lower Decks, Chris?
Yeah, I looked at it. There's some awesome stuff there. I don't know. I don't get a chance to play that often recently, but I think I'm definitely going to have to build a couple decks and sit down with my wife. We've been talking more about teaching our eldest to play more. He's tried a couple times, but see what I can build him out of some of that stuff.
Yeah, and I think, unfortunately, the Borg and the Voyager are kind of harder decks. They're more advanced concepts, but I think the Borg one is kind of a bit easier. You can just say, play as many people as possible and throw them all at missions.
Exactly.
Solve them,
Exactly. So it takes out the strategy of remembering to only play 9 people at a time at a mission. So it might actually make it easier.
The buzz about Lower Decks has been pretty good, but there was a little bit of controversy about the release schedule, and then a number of people thought that Lower Decks was coming out too close to the last expansion, which was Strange Bedfellows. There's some good arguments on both sides, but what is your opinion on release schedules? As like you said, someone who doesn't play very often, but as someone who you're very involved in all of the expansion releases because you have to put them all in our databases. So how does that affect you?
Well, the main one for this that affected me wasn't actually how close it was to Strange Bedfellows. It was how close it was to whatever the one he said that just came out that I just blanked on, Homefront.
Homefront, yeah.
Homefront 6. And that's because we just got a Homefront 6 donor badge and then immediately got the Lower Decks donor badge. And we like to try to leave the donor badges up for at least a month, preferably 2 if we can. So the Homefront 6 donor badge, I think, went up when the set was announced. The Lower Decks donor badge, I held off on. I didn't release it with the set announcement. I actually just released it this weekend with the set going live instead to try to give Homefront a little more time in the spotlight on the donor badge, to give the people who bought that badge a little more time having the active badge on their profile before we switch up to the new one. And so anyone that's watching now, if you go to the Promenade, make a donation, you can get the new Lower Decks donor badge. Is now available as of, I think, yesterday morning. I think I put it up. So
awesome. You can show your little Tsunkatse love with any donation amount, which is always appreciated. On the 1E side, the big talk, I guess, has been In the Zone being banned. I think that had happened before the last episode, but people are really getting the chance to sort of play in the zoneless environment. I know you don't play a lot of 1E, but you're an old-time 1E player and judge. 1E without In the Zone, is it a huge mistake or is it interesting?
I like it. I always had an issue within the zone, the way that it stopped you come from behind wins. I think that you should never be eliminated just because you're a few extra points behind. That shouldn't write you out of the game. And I think in the zone, obviously it had its uses. It definitely had some things that it helped with positively, but that was one of the negative side effects of the way the code was written. So I am actually on the 1 year errata team right now. So we are looking at how do we word that better so we can get it back as soon as possible to do the things it's supposed to without preventing things like a come from behind win that it was having a negative impact on. So hopefully we will see it back again in not too long. I don't have a schedule for that, obviously. We're just talking about things now. But it will hopefully come back in a better position for what it should be doing.
Yeah, and I still think it's not been gone long. I want it to stay gone longer because I don't think it's been gone long enough for players to A, really figure out what it now allows to happen, and B, what existing counters there are to those strategies. I mean, everybody's talking about the Genesis device, which was sort of the immediate. I mean, there was a lot of talk about Shakari, and there was a lot of talk about the Genesis device, and everybody's playing with the Genesis device. I haven't seen a Shakari deck yet, but there are counters to those things in the game.
Oh yeah, and when I say we're talking about how to get it back in now, we actually, I think that conversation sort of just started this weekend, basically. Like for the first month, we didn't even look at it because we wanted to see how the meta was going to react before we tried to react to it. We wanted to see how things were going to go, and then it was just this weekend with Aussie Continentals was this weekend. That was the first big event that this had an impact on. So we've started looking at the tournament reports from that to see where it impacted at the main event and at the side events, and see to start gathering information about how things have adjusted to it, to see how we want to move going forward from there.
Indeed, and since you mentioned Australian Continentals, I wish to congratulate our 3 Australian Continental champions, Matthew Ting for first edition, Greg Dillon for second edition, and Mike Nugent for triples. So who won less than an hour ago. So congratulations to you 3. Excellent showing down there. It sounds like it was a lot of fun. European Continentals is in 2 weeks, and then North American Continentals is at the end of the month at Gen Con. And then we'll talk about Worlds. So,
yep.
All right, let's. Any other Trek CC noteworthy news in the last month? I don't think so.
There's been a new tease image on the main page with a little picture of a cowboy tribble, but
cowboy tribble.
We can talk about that one later if you want.
Sure. Tribble with a hat. It's pretty awesome. So let's talk about the forum moderation. I mean, it's a short panel. Anyone who's listening live, there's a number of you listening live. Jump in the chat room, ask your questions, tell us what you have to say. Especially if you are opposed to forum moderation or the code of conduct or how it's being implemented. That's a particular view we're interested in, because I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think that at least Chris and I are kind of in favor of it. It looks like Christopher has joined us. Hello, Christopher.
Hello.
Your beard reigns supreme.
Oh, thank you.
Charlie apparently gave up the battle.
I have surrendered.
Oh, you're newly shaved.
Yes, I had to. It's too hot. Too hot.
It's hot here too, but I stay indoors instead. So
we're going to talk about forum moderation and the code of conduct now.
Yes.
So again, at TrekCC on Twitter, on Facebook, you can post questions and in the chat room on trekcc.org. So let's talk about forum moderation, and Altoid in the chat room had a question for us, which is a good place to start. How did forum moderation first be seen as a need? What was the incident that sparked it? History lesson required. So, I mean, we've had a forum moderator, Chris, since we started. There's always been somebody who could, remove spam posts and delete off-topic stuff. And then at one point we recruited Baron Morath, to help you. So we had 2 moderators.
Yep.
But we always had a very low moderation philosophy. Wouldn't you agree, Chris? So.
Yeah, we tried to keep as hands off as possible, to let the community deal with itself. And obviously, it was there when things got bad to put in bans if they were needed, anything like that. But for the most part, we generally tried not to get too involved in that. And then part of the problem was, from my point of view at least, as things gradually got worse, people taking advantage of the fact that we weren't doing any banning, it became harder for us to do any moderating at all, because we didn't have a real code of conduct. We didn't have anything that I could point at as a reason why I'm banning somebody. It was basically just my instinct, doing whatever I wanted, which obviously ran into other issues, especially if I was involved too closely in the situation causing the ban. Then, and that came up a lot, I think, when people were being critical of the continuing committee volunteers. That was a bit of a weak spot for me, because I was one of them, because I work closely with all of them. I didn't want to be seen as favoritism. I didn't want to be seen as being overly defensive and banning somebody just for being critical of us, because we've always been open to criticism as long as it's well phrased, and constructive criticism, and not just insults. But it was hard to draw that line, and so I ended up being a little too lenient on those things, and a lot of our volunteers were being hurt in the process because I was trying not to be seen as playing favorites. So a lot of our volunteers ended up getting insulted in the process, and then they felt like we weren't defending them properly because I wasn't kicking people, banning people, warning people, whatever. So I think that is sort of what led to us deciding to create a formal code of conduct, in answer to Altoid's question.
Well, and to be fair, it was not that there were CC members saying people are being critical and I'm upset. We all have the ability to take criticism, and many people on the forums are giving constructive criticism and have been giving constructive criticism. But it seems that over the past however long, there were increasing amounts of vitriol in some of the criticism, and people were not necessarily getting hurt by it on their behalf, but maybe on their team's behalf or on other people's behalf, and it was just getting bad. And to be fair, this most recent version is probably the 3rd or 4th time we've tried to be like, here's the line in the sand, and we're upping the moderation that we're going to do. And I found threads going back to 2011 that were like, well, here's the line in the sand, and we're not ever going to deal with this again, and then nothing ever changed, and that's my fault. But so when we first posted this, it was like, why should this be any different? And we're like, because we're done. We're not dealing with this anymore.
Yeah.
The specific incident so in general, we knew that we knew a couple things. We knew that forum participation was down. We knew that people were wanting more moderation. Those was not necessarily a correlation there. Like we didn't necessarily know why forum participation was down. That could have been any number of reasons. So what we did is we put together, I think this was, I want to say October of 2014. We put together we put out a call for volunteers to be on a special panel whose job would be to, gather information from the community about what they wanted, and then draft a code of conduct and a moderation proposal to give to the continuing committee that we would then, discuss and change and implement. And this was supposed to all happen sort of organically. There was, I don't remember exactly when it happened, there was a thread that kind of got really out of hand very quickly. A lot of personal attacks, and you're incompetent, you don't know what you're doing, and it just got way out of hand very quickly with a couple people. And it was frustrating for me because I'm watching this group behind the scenes that's like a month away from organically being done with their proposal, while we had I think it had to do with Chicago Masters and a scheduling conflict. Anyway, we had people threatening I'm not running my events now, I'm quitting, I don't want anything to do with this. And so basically what I did was I said, okay, I'm done. I am officially saying these two people are banned for a week, and anybody who makes a personal attack on anyone is banned for a week. And I think I banned another one or two people during that time. And then what we did is we went to the working group that was working on the forum thing, and we said, we need your proposal, and we need it now. And they gave it to us. We talked it over internally, and I think it was like 14 people voted for it, and 14 people, everybody who voted for it wasn't everybody, but I want to say it was about 14 people said, yes, we should implement this. And so we did. And that's where the current Code of Conduct and Moderation team came from. Now, we knew it wasn't going to be perfect. We knew it wasn't going to be, this is carved in stone and is never going to change. It's meant to be a sort of living procedure, a living document. But that's sort of the history of why we have forum moderation. Mm-hmm. The short answer is we should have had it the whole time, and we never did. So.
Yeah, and as far as Altoid put it, the incident, as you said, we had already been working on it. It had been more of a gradual escalation of things that had triggered us to already put together the team to start working on the code of conduct. That was all well underway before any of the incident could have occurred. As a result of the gradual escalation of things, and then that one thread just sort of triggered us to. Well, it made you step in and implement a couple bans even before we got the moderator team in place, and then triggered us to sort of rush the code of conduct in for rush through the last week or so of work on that to make sure we had something ready to go.
Yep. So that's sort of how it came to be. We have another question from the chat room from Kamala, Andrea. She wants to know, how do we feel it's working? How do we feel that it's working, versus how it was and how it was now? And Christopher has been quiet, so I will pick on him. From your point of view, how do you feel the forums are now versus how they were before?
Well, on first edition, we haven't really had that much problems, do we? I don't think so, anyway. Or at least I haven't been involved in any real, aggressive or picking on someone or anything like that. I think most of the discussions have been civil, and if someone has been nasty to someone, other people usually step in and say stop it. But I don't think so. I don't think that 1E has had the same problem that 2E might have had. But right now, I think it's working like I've usually seen all the time, more or less. So for me, I've not seen so much as a change as 2E might have seen. I don't know, really. I think it's fine as long as people are nice to each other, because we're here because we like to play a game, and we want to be nice to each other so we can keep playing games with each other. I think if we want to be evil to each other, build a deck and show each other how mean we can be by actually playing them. That's how I usually do, and I'm bad at building really nasty decks nowadays. I usually just, but nah, that's from my point of view. Did I answer the question at all?
I mean, it is sort of an interesting. It's an interesting pattern that many of the drama-related threads were 2E related. Not all of them. There's been 1E drama, and there's been drama on the Buzz and drama on the OP. But if you made a list of like top 10 drama-related threads, probably 40% of them are 2E related, and it's interesting. Maybe there's a lot of reasons why that might have been. I mean, I know second edition wasn't in a great place for a while. I think it's getting better with our new design strategies and our new philosophies, and it will get better with a regular release schedule. So, I mean, Chris, you went from being the person who was moderating to sort of like a mod CEO, a mod supervisor, where you're not really doing any moderation anymore, but you're sort of
No, I'm not
advising the moderators. So how is it flipped from your point of view?
Way less stressful for me, because I mean by the end, and part of the reason why we said we need a mod team is because I was just totally burnt out, and I know Mark was as well. Like we offered Mark the chance to stay on the moderator team and presumably to be head moderator at that point because he had the most seniority with the group, and he said, no, you know what, this is a good time. He's going to take this as an opportunity to step aside, and I don't blame him for that because, as I said, I did as well. I was quite happy to put down the moderator reins and let somebody else do that. So it's a lot less stressful for me. I still sort of, like you said, I'm like an advisor, I guess, to them because I help deal with any technical issues they have, and I'm always happy to help provide them with any history of how I used to deal with things, whatever. But I certainly don't tell them what to do. That's Mike's job now as the head moderator. I'm just there to answer questions, basically. And so it's nice, and I'm really happy with what I'm seeing behind the scenes, with the way that they're working together, the way that they're dealing with things. There are definitely some differing viewpoints that they bring to the team. Different people have different tolerances, I guess, within the team, just as within the community. So it's good to see them all bringing those different viewpoints to the table and talking about it and trying to find where they want to draw the line. And obviously, in the first couple of months, there were some issues where somebody would issue a warning or a ban, and then it would be immediately overturned by the rest of the team because it turned out that person was in the minority. And that's going to happen. As I said, they're working together to find where they want the line to be, what the common ground is within the entire team. So I think there will be fewer successful appeals in the future as they all get a feel for what warrants a ban, what doesn't warrant a ban. But I think the fact that there have been not so many, but there have been some successful appeals at this point is a sign that the system is working. So I think they're doing a good job, and they are. As I said, they had some trouble finding their footings, but I think they're doing a good job overall, and they have a good team that we've got together. So I think it's going really well right now from my point of view. I think you muted there, Charlie.
Yeah, sorry. The forum moderation is it's a long overdue necessity. I wish, ideally, we would have a forum where we had Wheaton's law in place, don't be a dick, and everybody would just sort of be respectful for each other. But for whatever reason, human beings in general are incapable of that. Sometimes it's because you had a crappy day, and sometimes it's because you like being a dick, and that's whatever. The demand. This is not the important thing to remember is that the code of conduct, as it was written, was almost entirely based specifically to address points raised by people on the forums. All of this work that was preceded by sending a survey to every registered user on the site. asking them, have you stopped coming to the forums, and why have you stopped coming to the forums, and what are things that you'd want to see addressed before you come back? And that was where all these things are coming from. It wasn't just like I went to the team and said, I want person A, person Y, and person Z to be banned from the forum, so make rules that screw those people over. It was like they identified what the community was asking for as a whole. And obviously, in any community, you're going to have people who agree and disagree, and that's fine. There are always going to be people who are like, there should be no moderation. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I don't think that's ever going to happen. So what we need to do is try to figure it out, where the level is. And I would like to think that over time, and realistically, I mean, how many actions has there been by the moderators? Like 10, 12?
Yeah, I was gonna say that probably about a dozen, most of which were just warnings, and then only a very small handful of bans. I would say 4 or 5 bans and
so
a handful of warnings.
Out of like 300 regular semi-active users who post, in June we posted about 3,600 times.
Mm-hmm.
There have been, between, when did the moderation start? Like April? So
yeah,
April, May, June was like almost 10,000 posts, and there have been 12 actions.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's just statistically really, I could understand more. I could more understand the outrage if that was 12 out of 100, or if there were 1,200 actions. But 12 out of 10,000 or so posts, 12 out of 300 users. The scale is. I'm not trying to dismiss the people who are objecting on for other reasons, but I don't think it's fair to say moderation is being done too much, because it clearly, there are people who think it should be done 0, but it's like when 12 out of 10,000 posts are affected.
Yeah, and I think overall, I think it is helping the atmosphere. Like, I don't know how much people are not posting because they're afraid of being moderated, or if they're just thinking a little harder about what they're posting. But in the last week on the Buzz forum, we had a 9-page thread on gay marriage, a 4-page thread on Texas, which I think was more gay marriage stuff, and a 2-page thread on election stuff, all of which, very hot topics. People get very passionate about them. I think in those 3 threads combined, I may have noticed maybe 3 or 4 reported posts where people thought somebody crossed the line and they reported to the moderators. And I don't think there's been any action on that thread, because I think the moderators all decided, no, this is okay. They're being passionate about it, but they're not being insulting about it. So there is still a lot of passionate dialogue happening on the forums about very controversial subjects, but it is happening much more civilly, which I think is, I don't know if I could have said the same thing a year ago if we had some threads like this then. And there's people, there's a lot of conversation happening, but there's no insult happening, there's no personal attacks happening, there's no bans happening. And so, people, I think it demonstrates that people can still have these conversations. You don't have to be worried about posting just because you have a strong opinion about something, as long as you're able to word it in a civil manner.
Yeah, I
think it's working.
I've always said you can make a long post saying, I think Lower Decks is poorly designed and the design team did a bad job, and here's why. The only thing you can do is say Charlie is fat and shitty and should not lead this set anymore.
Yeah.
There's a difference. If my weight has nothing to do with my ability to make cards. You can criticize my card designs and you can say I don't think Charlie should be leading sets anymore. You can't do it. You can't. Charlie's.
Leave out the personal attacks.
Yeah, you gotta make it about the work and not the people. So, We have a couple more questions, which is good. The Guardian in the chat room is asking, is the different tolerances that you talked about a strength or a weakness of the system?
Oh, I think it's a strength, because that's one of the other advantages of having a 6-person mod team as opposed to a 1 or eventually 2-person mod team that we had before, is that I think it's more reflective of the community. So different people have different tolerance levels, the same way that different people in the community have different tolerance levels. And assuming the mod team is fairly representative of the community, then by that microcosm of people working out where they think the line should be drawn within themselves, then hopefully that line will be representative of something that the entire community can accept on average. Something that's going to be harsh enough for the people that are more easily offended without being completely stifling, as some of the people that want free speech for all. I can say whatever I want. I consult whoever I want. Trying to find the line there. I think having a team with the different tolerance levels helps find that line and make it accurate for what the community wants.
Christopher, do you have an opinion?
Sorry, I was reading a mail here at the same time. I was doing. Ignore me for right now. I have.
He's just lurking.
It's all good. All good. I tend to agree. I think that what we are in right now is the feeling yourselves out stage, of a relationship. As an example, we've got 6 moderators, 2 of which are brand new. So we really had 8 moderators in the time that this has gone on. Eight people, and they're trying to figure out where I don't think it's a line as much as it's a range. Here's the range at which things are going to start being actionable, and some people are going to be pulling the trigger at the lower line, and some people are going to pull the trigger at the higher line, and that's the reason we have the appeals process. It's the reason we have the systems in place. I think that as they get better, as they get more comfortable with the system and each other, that range will narrow and narrow until it's practically a line, and then the differing opinions will matter less and less. Now, it's a good thing because it will keep the moderators constantly evaluating where that line is. Because the worst thing we could do is say, okay, here's the line, and then that's written in stone, and it never changes. Because as the community changes, the line should change as well. So I think that it's a good thing overall. I think that it just seems worse than it is right now because that they're figuring out where that window is. So
yeah.
Let's see. Another question from Altoid, and this is kind of a relevant question. What is your response to those who say, get a thicker skin and don't like the attacks, ignore it? And this I'm going to take this one because I feel very strongly about this. Those are very much blame the victim arguments. I mean, it is essentially, and I'm not trying to make light of this, but if someone is, attacked or victimized, it's saying it's their fault.
Yeah.
Oh, you shouldn't have carried that cash with you. You wouldn't have been robbed. Well, you might be right, but you're being an asshole. And I'm not calling anyone on the forums an asshole because I definitely think there are, you can choose to read things as a personal attack that may not be, and people read things differently. And I think we need to recognize that there are some people in the community that don't have a thick skin, and there are some people in the community that can't ignore things as easily as others. And we need to, instead of saying, well, you should get a thicker skin, or you should grow up, or you should just learn to deal with it, I think we just need to say, help those people. Also, it's tough because I don't want to blame the victims, but at the same time, if user A has a problem with user B, user A and user B, user A can faux user B. The faux system works for the most part to keep, don't engage that person. Like, if that person just rubs you the wrong way, do your best to not interact with them. Now, if you interact with them and they're an asshole, report it. If you interact with them and you're offended, report it. That's the whole point of the system. But the whole idea of you should grow a thicker skin, that's extremely offensive to me, because it's blaming somebody for being offended when they can't control how they feel. You know, it's not, you're not in their position, you're not in their shoes. You don't get to say you should not be offended by this. You don't get to say that.
Yeah.
So I really hate that argument. It's a bad argument, and I would really like to never see it again. Again, there are ways for people to avoid each other that rub each other the wrong way, and that should be something that we educate people about and encourage people to use. But ultimately, if a user is getting offended, that user should be able to go to the moderators and say, I'm offended by this. You know, and at the same time, if the moderators then decide that that's not an actionable post, they need to be, you know, sensitive to that user's report. You know, if I report a user for being, you know, offensive, and that person's not being offensive, they shouldn't just come back to me and say, oh, nothing, it's not a big deal, don't worry about it. Because that again is disrespecting my feelings, and my, you know, the moderators need to say, we have decided that this is not actionable because it doesn't violate this section. You know, we understand that you feel it does. However, we've discussed it and decided that there are ways to answer those concerns without dismissing them. And I think that that's something that the moderators will have to work on, and the community is going to have to work on, to be you know, inclusive and receptive to different points of view and different feelings instead of exclusive. So that is. Anybody else want to say anything on that topic, or did my soapbox cover it?
No. I can chime in here, as I'm the only one here that is not an English native speaker. And a thing that we have to remember is that some people in the community is actually not native English speakers, and it's really hard to read between the lines when you're not a native speaker. If you're not really good at English, it's hard to know if it's a joke, or if it's sarcasm, or if it's irony, or, you know, those things are hard for me in Swedish, even reading into posts from Swedes, and I can tell you it's really hard to read between the lines when it's not in your native language. And I work in English, and I think that I'm at least somewhat fluent in the language, but sometimes I just don't get it, because it could be cultural, it could be a language barrier, it could be a local thing, you know, not even like a cultural barrier, but actually a local connected thing that I just don't get, which is, it's really hard to understand what people are saying if they really are trying to be mean, or if they're really just joking, or if they're just, you know, blurting something out that was not meant to be on text on a forum. Sometimes it's just hard, and I think it's hard to remember that. We need to remember it. We can't forget that some of our community is not native English speakers, and they just don't get it. So
that's a very good point. So a couple more questions I see in the chat room. Faithful Reader has asked, has anybody been shunned from a tournament based on forum conduct? And to the best of my knowledge, that has not been the case.
That has actually happened, I think, once. I'm trying to remember the details. I don't believe they were kicked out of the tournament, but there was an issue where there were two people that were going at it on the forums, not getting along well, and they were paired up against each other in the next round of an online tournament, like 2 days after the big explosion on the forums had happened. And the TD ended up deciding that that there is something in the tournament code of conduct that says about behavior at a tournament, within a tournament setting, and how that can affect pairings. You can get a warning for it, whatever. And he ended up using that under the theory that because it's an online tournament, the forums is the tournament setting. It was a really weird sort of fringe case. It's not something I don't think anyone's actually ever been kicked out of a tournament before, but there was one case because he had insulted this person so grievously, basically, that his opponent refused to play him. And so I don't remember if he ended up just being repaired or what exactly the result was, but that is, I think, the one case where tournament conduct has impacted a tournament, or forum conduct has impacted a tournament because it was an online tournament.
I do want to make it clear that the code of conduct that we're talking about, the forum moderation, is only applying to the forums, and the intention is that you are not prohibited from participating in tournaments or doing anything else on the site because you're banned from the forums. I know there's some technical, right now there are technical limitations that if you are currently banned from the forums, you can't do your deck lists or schedule tournaments or things like that, and that's going to be resolved at some point, hopefully soon. But I can't speak to that. But the idea is, if you get a forum ban because you acted badly on the forums, that doesn't affect anything else that goes on in terms of your community participation. So
yeah, and there have been, I know when Killer Bee was banned from the forums recently, he was still participating in Wednesday night dribbles. He would just log into Skype or log into Lackey and connect up with them there. Even so, he couldn't meet in the chat room for the normal muster they do in the chat room, but he was able still to connect up with people over Skype and Lackey and get into the games, and he had no problems playing, and nobody had any problems with him playing. Because, as you say, forum ban should not impact tournament eligibility.
Correct. Next question: how transparent is the process? I.e., is the moderatorial dialogue thread transparency? And I think the answer is yeah. I mean, the moderators have a private forum, and I don't believe that should be public, but all moderator action should be public. And
yeah,
I think that's the point.
They're posting pretty much everything. As I said, I watched the private forum just to see if there's any questions for me or whatever. And aside from the exact results of appeals, who voted which way and things like that, they do a pretty good job of posting every action they do, whether it's an appeal, an overturn on appeal, a ban, a warning. It's either in the moderator dialogue thread, or a lot of time I know a moderator will edit it into the offensive post. They'll just put a red note in the post saying this user was warned or banned for this post, so everybody knows and can see what caused the action. So no, I think they're doing a really good job being as transparent as possible about that, about everything.
All right. FL Razor, Flazer, Jeremy Benedict, our chief ambassador. Does anyone feel that some of the controversy over the code of conduct is due to interpretation of the rules by a community of gamers that is used to trying to interpret rules? A lot of the arguments about it seem to have been over the details more than having it or not.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I think actually a lot of the controversy, I think that's actually an excellent point, is that a lot of it is because of people trying to interpret, nitpick the rules, pull them apart, and rather than just looking at the spirit of the rules, which is we're just trying to cut down the crap. And I think part of it also, though, in addition to that, is caused by lack of trust. Basically, the community, doesn't really. It takes time to build up trust in any relationship, and the community hasn't yet had time to gain trust in the moderators to do the appropriate actions at the appropriate times, to not abuse their powers, to not just go crazy and ban everyone that they don't like. So I think that's why a lot of people are more on edge, is because they haven't yet had a chance to trust the moderators. And I think if people can, give them a couple more months to prove themselves, to prove that they are doing this for the right reasons, they are doing what they should be doing, and they're not going to go crazy abusing their powers, and give a chance to gain that trust, then I think, 6 months from now, I think we won't even be talking about this anymore. Hopefully, at least, it'll become a non-issue, and people will just accept that they are doing their job for the greater good. It's like if you lived in Mad Max, Wild West, whatever, and all of a sudden a bunch of people came in and said, "We're the cops. We're going to tell you guys all to put down your guns, and we're going to keep everything under control." There's going to be some initial push. And maybe that's a bad example because these days the cops have lost a lot of trust as well. But for a while, at least, people trusted the police, even though obviously there was going to be some initial struggle with that, as people learn who they can trust and who they can't.
Yeah, I think a large part of because there's two traditional aspects to this. You have the sort of Wheaton's law, the fundamental, which you have what we used to have, which is like, don't be a dick. If you're a dick, we're going to punish you. And then you have the extreme other end, which is like, here are the specific things that you can and can't do, outlined. And if it's not on there, it doesn't exist. And I think that the code of conduct right now is trying to be more towards that side than the other side. They wanted to try to. The problem is if you go with Wheaton's law and have a team of moderators, that whole what's acceptable to moderate range is never going to be narrow. It's always going to be really wide. It's going to be whoever got to that post first, and then if you go the other way where it's like, here's this super exacting detailed list, then you get into the situation what Jeremy's talking about now, where you're going to find the rules lawyers who are like, I can say this but not this, and if I say this, and they're going to find every little loophole. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think in the middle it's like, here's the things that we're trying to make sure can't happen, and then the moderators have the authority to stop those things.
Yeah,
that's the right answer, where you try to get it, but it's still going to have these debates. And I think ultimately the insight is correct, that you've got gamers who are used to gaming the systems trying to game the system.
Yeah, and I know the moderators are looking at places where that might be an issue of people trying to find loopholes or whatever. One recent change, I don't remember if it was actually posted yet or if it's going to be posted soon, but there was one line in the code of conduct that they were working on changing, where it said, you're not allowed to insult or disparage anybody based on based on certain characteristics about them, such as their gender, their class, their race, whatever. And they sort of looked at that and went, okay, this list is never going to be complete, so we can either add a whole bunch more stuff to it that we realize now we forgot, or just scrap the whole list of examples and say, don't disparage people based on something about them like that, without listing all the examples, when the list is never going to be complete, and someone's going to say, oh, well, you didn't tell me I couldn't make fun of them because of their eye color. That wasn't on the list, so I'm allowed to do that. Well, no, you're not. So I think that's an example where they started with and it was never meant to be complete. It was always just a set of examples, but they're like, you know what, if we're not going to have complete examples, let's just remove all the examples and assume people can figure out what this means, just to avoid the rules loopholing.
And a couple of people in the chat room were basically saying, I want things to be simple, and I want the rules to be about treating people fairly. That was Kazan Bad. And Jeremy is also saying, I think it would be awesome if Wheaton's law was all it took. And again, Wheaton's law is don't be a dick. Mm-hmm. I think that's the end goal, right? The goal here is don't be a dick. And I think it would be awesome if basically when you signed on the forums, it was like, here's the forum moderation rules. Don't be a dick. Click here for details. And then there was a post somewhere that has the details about, what the moderators can and can't do and will and won't do for the people who want to have that information. But eventually the goal is to make an environment where it's like, don't be a jerk to other people and you won't have a problem. And that's ultimately what it's about. So here's an interesting question, and then I want to sort of talk about a couple of the suggestions that were made. I think we're going to go a little longer than an hour today, but not too much. Question for the chat room from Altoid again. What are the repercussions, if any, for someone who files the equivalent of false reports? or files multiple reports that someone's posts are offensive when the mod team determines they're not? And then how many false reports can someone file before actions are taken against the boy who cried wolf?
Yeah, that is an interesting question. It's one that I don't think I believe the mod team has sort of touched on briefly, but hasn't really made any formal rules about, like in their internal discussions. I mean, there are no repercussions for someone who files false reports. That's
I don't. I want to avoid the term false report because
yes. Okay,
that implies somebody who's reporting a post that they're not offended by, and if we get to that point, that's sad. That's just sad. I think what we want to talk about is a situation where somebody is reporting posts they are offended by, but they're reporting them in large numbers.
Yes, and that is something that we have seen in the past. Prior to, I don't think it's happened as much since the mod team came into effect, but prior to the mod team in the last year or so, there would be spats where, for the course of a week, one poster or one member would report every single post made by another person that they didn't like. And some of them, I always read them and tried to see from their point of view what might be insulting about it, where they might feel attacked. And some of them I could find that, and some of them I couldn't, and I didn't know if the person was just reporting them, to make themselves feel better, or because they were actually feeling attacked, or because, maybe they had a bad week, and so they were especially sensitive that week and reading everything as a personal attack. We don't know what's happening in people's lives, as you said earlier. So, and I have to admit that there were times that I did start to look at those as Boy Who Cried Wolf and take a quick glance and stop. And that was when I was getting so totally burnt out with the whole moderating thing, and that's why I stepped down as the moderator. The current moderating team has not really had to deal with that yet. But I said they've had brief conversations with them. They have had brief conversations with themselves on that topic, and basically they have agreed that they will look at every post as a fresh one. They're only human, so they might start to face the Boy Who Cried Wolf thing eventually, but hopefully because there's enough of them looking at these that it'll sort of be spread out and it won't really become an issue. But they have decreed to themselves that they will make every possible effort to look at every report with fresh eyes, ignoring how many times user A has reported user B this week. And there will definitely not be any actions against user A for making the reports. They will never. That goes back to sort of victim blaming almost. Like they will never punish somebody for being sensitive, whether it's overly sensitive or not, or whatever. I can't draw that line, but they will never punish somebody for being sensitive, for feeling the need to report something that is happening to them, whatever.
Yeah, I think that's really the only way you can go about it. If the moderators are ending up in a situation where, because ultimately they volunteered to do a job, and that job is to process reports. And if they're getting 10 reports a week from user A, they need to process them.
Mm-hmm.
If it starts to, I'd say the only real places where you get into a problem are, somebody trying to use the system to overwhelm the mod, like somebody literally reporting every single post just as a make work,
mm-hmm.
or where it gets into a vendetta type situation, where a user is going and reporting every single post that another user is making. At a certain point, I think there needs to be a system to recognize that. Again, I think we'd be very careful so we're not punishing the person who's reporting. Especially if as long as the person is making legitimate reports, like, I'm offended by this, I think this violates this, I think this is a problem, then I think there should never be an action. But if they're literally just going and spamming reporting, that's a different problem,
Yeah, but even that one, I think, they're going to try to avoid punishment and just maybe try to sit down, open a dialogue with the person, say, listen, you've been using the supporting button a lot. Why don't we talk about this? Why do you feel all these are attacks against you, or why are you doing this? Or let's have a conversation, try to get to the bottom of what's going on here, um, and try to deal with things just by like sitting down and talking to a person instead of saying, so you have a warning because you've been using the report button too often, which is something, as far as I know, they never want to do.
The mod squad is actually our counselor.
Yeah, in a way, that's one of their jobs is to resolve conflicts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there's been a couple suggestions in the monitorial dialogue thread that I wanted to sort of bring up. Again, I know that this particular panel is very pro moderation, and
okay, sorry, Charlie. Before you go on,
yes.
I just wanted to say one thing. There was a post in the chat room by Kamala relating to what we were just talking about the mods being counselors. She said, I will say that I've had some great conversations with Hermes, who's one of the moderators, about why I've been offended in the past and why I've complained about posts, and he's been very respectful of my point of view and talking me through things. So I just wanted to mention that as an example, that they are working to be moderators in the counselor sense as well. That I know Kamala and Hermes had some issues early on where they weren't always getting along, and the way she felt like he was dismissing a lot of her reports, and so they sat down and talked about it, and he's obviously been respectful about it, and they've sort of talked things through, and so that is part of their goal as well, is not just to be sitting around banning people, but also be talking with people and working things out and trying to find non-banning solutions to problems.
That is a good thing. That's a good point. So,
yeah.
So there's been a couple suggestions on the forums about what can be improved, and I want to just highlight a couple of them and sort of get your thoughts on them. One of them was sort of a moderator oath, which is as part of the rules, we require the moderators to have made a post somewhere that says, I will be fair, I will be impartial, I will not involve myself in situations where I do not believe that I can be those things. Personally, I think this is a great idea, and I think that we should implement this soon. But what do you guys think?
Yeah, well, I think that comes back to what I said earlier about the community needing to gain trust in the moderators. From my point of view, because I've already been working with these guys and I've seen the way they work, I already trust that all that stuff is true, even if it remains unsaid. But I think if it will help build the community's trust in them if they make a post saying that, then by all means, so definitely. Is anything like that will help the community have more trust in them. I think that's ultimately what it comes down to, is that we need the trust there.
Well, I don't trust oaths at all. So, but that's because we don't have them here at all, and we used to have them, but nobody followed them. So they were just empty words. So we got rid of them. But I think trust is good any way we get it, and if we have an oath for it, sure, why not? I'm not big on oaths.
I don't know
unless they're Klingon.
I don't know that it needs to be super formal. I just think that if we have here's 3 things that you have to say in your own words, and then when they start as a moderator, they have to post it. And then that's really it. Just as acknowledgement of that they are going to attempt to do these things. I think that's a great plan. I think that the CC should probably figure out what we want that to be, and then ask the moderators to make that post, and then have it in place for all future moderators. So I think that is likely something to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Another suggestion, this is an interesting one, is that sort of talking about appeals. The idea of so the situation that happened is a user was banned for 10 days, but because they were banned, they couldn't appeal. They had to appeal that they wanted to appeal the 10-day ban, and then it took multiple days to resolve the appeal. So an appeal that was ultimately successful. So the user served 3 days of a 10-day ban that then got overturned. And yes, that means it wasn't on their record, but they were still banned 3 days for something that the moderators ultimately decided was not a bannable action. So the suggestion has been made that, you shouldn't be punished prior to the resolution of an appeal. So I guess the specific suggestion is you get told you're going to be banned and that you have 24 hours to appeal. If you choose not to appeal, then 24 hours later the ban happens. If you choose to appeal, the ban is delayed until the appeal is resolved, and then if the appeal is resolved, nothing happens. If the appeal is not resolved, if the appeal is denied, the ban would take in effect. So what do you guys think of this suggestion?
I think it has some merit. I think we'd need to look into it and put some limitations on it and stuff. I mean, I can understand where they're coming from, that you don't want to have somebody banned for something they ultimately decides wasn't that bad. But at the same time, you don't want to have, I guess you run the risk that if somebody gets their message coming in that, okay, you're going to be banned, that if they look at it and decide, oh yeah, well, I guess I can look at that and I can see that I don't have any chance of appeal, so I may as well, go on a tilt, and they start doing all sorts of crazy things because they have 24 hours free. So we'd have to make sure we put some caveat in there that, if you get a second warning during your first probation, whatever you want to call it, then it can result in an immediate ban. You have to put some sort of catch in there. And I mean, I guess the part of the reason why I'm not 100% convinced we need that is because the first warning is basically meant to be your probation. So if you get a warning for a post, then you're not actually removed from the site, so you can appeal it freely. And if you appeal it successfully, then the next time you get a warning, it's only going to be a warning. And so, as long as you're able to appeal things, then you're never actually going to be banned. And if you get to the point where you've been banned, it's because you've already failed a couple appeals. So you already have something of a history, I guess. So maybe you don't deserve as much leniency at that point, I guess. But I can see both sides of it. I think it's definitely worthy of conversation, and looking at that as something to change. And if that's what the community decides that they think that's fairest, then so as long as we can put some caveat in there to prevent somebody from going crazy and taking advantage of that 24 hours to do whatever they want. And then, obviously when we get like spam bots, we want to be able to still ban them right away. So it comes back to some...
Right. There, I think there has to be some discretion for, like, a likely spam bot. I think there's a difference between banning a spam bot and banning a person who made a personal attack or was doing something actionable. So.
For me, I've been hanging around on other internet forums for years now, and I've never seen anywhere where they had a system where you can actually appeal your ban, but instead they just had like insta-ban for if you did something wrong and someone actually did take the time to look through your actions and decided that you were banned. You got a short ban for first you got a couple of minutes, and then you got a cooldown period, and if you did something within that cooldown period, your next ban was longer, heavier, and you got a new cooldown period, and if you again did something within that cooldown period, you got a longer one. And then as soon as the cooldown period cut down, you went down the system again till you got down to a couple of minutes, because most of the time it was just down to boiling blood. People got angry, people got frustrated, people got into stuff. They got really, because they thought something. They thought something really, really. They were engaged in the conversation, or they were mad because whatever, they could have a bad day, bad week, bad year, or whatever. You know, anything could. We don't know, but
and that's the point of the. I mean, we've all had that, and that's understandable, and that's the point of the whole warning system. Is like, you have that really crappy day, and you make a really angry post. Yes. And the moderators are like, hey, you shouldn't have done that. And most people, most of the time, are going to come back and edit the post or delete it or apologize. And they'll just be like, all right, I was an asshole because I had a really crappy day, and I'm sorry. And the whole idea is that's the point of your warning.
Yeah.
You know,
but
to give you a chance to fly off the handle when you had a tough week.
But then we come back to blaming the guy that actually was on the receiving end, because most of the time it's like, well, we banned someone because they did something bad, or we thought they did something bad. Someone reported someone for being bad. Person A reporting something, whatever. But what I'm trying to say is, like, when you kick someone out for a couple of minutes or up to an hour, the one that actually got so frustrated that he had to report, person A. Person B can do whatever they want for an hour because the person A ain't coming back for that time, and then they can just go about, and person A comes back and person B is gone, and he can do whatever he wants for a couple of hours more before person B comes back again, and they get at it again or whatever. But most of the time it's just like, you just need that space where people are not in the forum. And sure, we have 24-hour cycles because we're all around the globe, and the forums they can be months old because we have necro threads all year round. So old stuff can come back and haunt you, but you know, most of the time it's, you have the time to cool down, you have the time to think about what you actually said, if it was really a cool or interesting, if it was the right thing to say. And you know, I've been kicked out myself for a couple of reasons on other forums just because I was really into a conversation, and you know, I would say that I did not get that people were frustrated with me not feeling their side of the story, and you know.
Yeah, I mean, I will say this, in terms of forum moderation goes, ours is actually the most favoring the poster that one of the most favoring the poster that I've ever seen. Because like you said, most of the time on a forum moderation, they have a whole team, but it's like, you're moderated. It's done. There's no appeal process. It's like somebody decided to moderate you, you got moderated, and it was over. You had no appeal, no chance to deal with it. You know, at least on our system, you know, you have the opportunity to appeal that and get that off your record. And I mean, somebody in the chat room, The Guardian, said, you know, if a moderator has decided that an action is bannable and gets overturned, it was at least bad enough to be considered. A partial ban and then a clean record doesn't bother him. So, you know, in the situation earlier where the user got a 10-day ban and they appealed it 3 days later, it was a bad enough action to be considered to be bannable. You know, if the person ends up missing 3 days and then gets his ban wiped out, you know, he at least is okay with it. I mean, I don't think that we're going to answer this question today. I was just sort of bringing that up as a topic. And ultimately, it's not going to change unless, you know, the community decides this is what we want to see, and then the moderators, you know, implement it. So I do want to say I would like to see the moderators prioritize swift action on appeals. You know, I would really like to not see appeals sitting around for 3 days. I don't think that should be happening.
Yeah, and in that case, I mean, they always, with an appeal, as soon as they get 3 votes in favor of appeal, like they don't wait. Because when they have an appeal situation, there's 6 moderators total. Whichever one implemented the initial ban is left out of the appeal process. So the other 5, so they need a simple majority of 3 people agreeing with the appeal in order to overturn it and to overturn the ban. So as soon as they have 3 votes in favor of appeal, they don't wait for the other 2 to vote. They will immediately unban the person. But I know in the case of that one, I think 1 or 2 of the moderators was out of town at the time, and one of them had just stepped down, and we were just bringing somebody else up to speed, and it was sort of a tumultuous time within the moderator team, which is why it took a couple days to get the 3 votes. But hopefully in the future, that's definitely something they can improve upon.
Charlie,
I would like to see that be, a much quicker turnaround.
Yeah.
So, all right. So I'm gonna make a last call for questions from the chat room or Twitter or Facebook. We're gonna talk about a few more topics. We're gonna answer the questions, and then we're gonna wrap up the show. I have a surprise for everyone to sort of end on a super positive note. So I got when this hangout was dedicated to this topic because there was a blow up earlier in the month about a particular user, and he got banned. He tried to circumvent the ban, and then he got banned for that, and it just kind of escalated into a situation, and it was generating a lot of discussion. And I know that one of the most common pieces of feedback was, "I'm tired of talking about this." So we are aware of that, and I mean, I was hoping that people would come to this hangout and share their thoughts, and we could sort of just have a big community discussion about it, and then make some changes, and then hopefully stop talking about it. But in any way, I did get a couple pieces of feedback that I wanted to share because I had invited everybody to send me private messages. I'm going to leave names out because I didn't explicitly get permission to get names, but one user caught me in the chat room and said, "The code of conduct has had a mixed impact on my view of the forums. Most of it is positive, but the feeling I've had over the last 2 weeks or so is that it is being applied in too draconian a fashion and curtailing interaction." And this was directly in response to the whole multi-ban circumventing ban situation. The whole situation with that user, I do think that user is an unpleasant online presence, but I also feel that at least this latest example was overkill. The general takeaway I got from it was to avoid posting anything that might possibly offend someone. It might be alleviated by having someone outside of the mod team decide on bans and such, like the appropriate punishment for an offense. But right now, I'm getting the impression of stormtroopers. So that was a suggestion that was brought up a few times, which was the moderators would process reports and decide when an action was to be taken, but then somebody else would actually take the action. Sort of a separation of powers type argument. So
they wanted a judge, more or less.
Sure. I mean, I think they want the moderators to be the prosecution, I guess, in that analogy, and then somebody else to finally decide what the punishment is. To me, I think that's just adding. The reason I understand the theory is that the people who are, flagging things shouldn't be handing out punishments, but it's going to add an extra layer of complexity to the situation. It's longer delays between, this gets flagged. Well, now we have to wait for the guy who signs the punishments to be on to decide what the punishments are. And to me, where the code of conduct is got a clearly leveled system where it's like, these are the prescribed punishments in the order that you apply them. I don't think you need that extra party. But it's certainly something that we're open to discussing. So, and then I got a private message. I'm a regular visitor to the forums, and I find myself more inclined to visit and participate since the Code of Conduct came into effect. The Code of Conduct was long overdue and welcome. The mods are doing a difficult but necessary job. It's a shame that they're needed, but sadly you can't trust people not to be dicks to one another. Sad face. I think that ultimately, the idea behind the code of conduct is simply to make sure that we're all able to sit here and talk about Star Trek, not to make each other feel bad, and not to keep people from posting. Like, if the code of conduct is like overwhelmingly creating this atmosphere of fear, which some say that it is, that's a failure. Just as much as it's a failure if everybody's running around calling each other names. You don't want to be on either end of that. I'm not sure that that is a. I think we just had a spam bot join us. Anyway, I'm not sure that that's a. I lost my train of thought. Sorry, there was porn flashing on the Hangout. We don't want fear, but we also don't want, hostility and personal attacks. So we want to be much more towards everybody feels like they can post. So if you are out there and if you have the opinion that, like, I can't post anything because I'm going to get moderated, we want to hear from you. We want to know why you feel that way. Are you feeling that way because everything you post tends to be a personal attack? Well, then, and if that's the case, you might need to reevaluate how you say things. I don't mean that to be an attack on you. I just mean if every post that you make is inclined to be moderated, you might want to think about how you're posting things. If it's more of a, I don't want to say anything because I'm afraid that criticism is going to be punished. Criticism is explicitly protected. There have been numerous threads where people are criticizing. They're criticizing the release schedule. They're criticizing the European schedule.
Again.
Yes, more porn. The release schedule, that is allowed. It is simply saying, this so-and-so is a bad person because this schedule is shitty. That's what's not allowed. So let's hit the chat room and see if we had any other questions. What if a moderator has a vendetta against a user and bans that user? Who is watching the watchers? Well, we talked about that. That's essentially why we have the appeals process.
Yeah, and Iron Mike is the head moderator, and he has the power to remove any moderator that he feels is misbehaving. Armis right now is the deputy head moderator, I guess, that has, if he feels there's a problem with Iron Mike, then he can do the same kind of thing. I think we haven't really talked about how to do that, but basically if he comes to me and all the other moderators are on his side saying Iron Mike is abusing everything, then I will remove Iron Mike from head moderator position. But again, this is not the kind of thing that we have seen any indication of, and nothing we're really worried about. But yeah, they have a seniority system within the moderators of who is the head mod, who is the deputy, and so on down the line, so that anytime there's an action involving any of them, if somebody reports a moderator of something they've done, then that moderator is not involved in the discussions. And if they all decide that there's a problem with one of the moderators, then we'll deal with it at the time. But I have not seen any indication of anything like that right now, and nor do I really expect to. All of our moderators are very mature and very responsible with their powers. So.
You're muted.
You're muted again, Charlie.
Sorry. That was all the questions that I saw. There were some very good comments in the chat room that I could spend all day reading, but we've already been running over, so I am going to leave you with a spoiler because it seems fun, and I can. So let me pull up my screen. So we had a 1E release in the end of May. We just had a 2E release literally 2 days ago. And we have another release coming soon.
Yay.
For Tribbles, which I know people are excited about. Oh, you know what? I have to... Sorry, this didn't work last time. I have to save this in a different file. Give me a second.
You're showing off the entire print sheet instead.
I will not be showing off the entire expansion. That would be, well, I don't have a Tribbles brand manager to yell at me, but I don't think that would be a wise decision. So I want to give a shout out to Andrea Kamala because she took on the role of Tribbles art director recently to help out the art department and our art director Johnny with the Tribbles images because they are time intensive and they are frequently thankless. And this was Andrea's first project. In fact, the image that I am about to show you is one of her audition images, one of the images that she sent in that got her the job. It is pretty good. I just want to say Andrea and Johnny have done a fantastic job with this Tribbles expansion that you will see shortly, and she will continue to do awesome things, I think. So Andrea, thank you for taking the job, and let's show off a little bit of your work. Can we see this card?
So far it's black. Oh, there.
I need to lock this on me. All right, what we are looking at is 10 anti. This is a new Tribble power in our Tribbles expansion. 10 anti. All players place a card from hand in the pot. The next player that plays a Kapla Tribble scores points equal to the highest Tribble in the pot. Then the cards in the pot are placed in their owner's discard piles. So the way this works is when you play an ante, everybody puts a card face down in a pot on the center of the table. And that pot stays until somebody plays a Kapla or the game ends. So it persists across rounds. So if multiple people play antes, there will be a lot of cards in the pot. When somebody plays a Kapla, you look at all the cards in the pot, score points equal to the highest one, and then everybody discards those cards. So this is kind of a 10 discard in a way. You can use this to put a card in your discard pile, but you can't control when that card ends up in your discard pile. But it will be out of hand because it goes into the pot. So you could use 10 ante to go out. If you had a 10 ante and another card in your hand, you could 10 ante and throw it in the pot and you would be out. So it is a soft 10 discard, but it's a super fun little gambling power that has tested well and we're excited to bring to you soon. I don't know if you can see the number down here, but it is 92V. And I giggle every time I see this picture because there are Tribbles on Neelix's head. And that makes me laugh. So there you go, 10 ante coming soon to a Tribbles expansion near you. What do you guys think about that? You gonna play that?
Yeah.
Looks good to me.
I want an anti-Kapla deck. So, all right. I think that is about it for this episode of the Observation Lounge. I will be posting a poll shortly to schedule the next episode, and we're not going to talk about the Code of Conduct unless somebody brings it up. Again, the Observation Lounge is intended to be the community show where you and the community get to send me your thoughts or come on the show and talk about topics that are of interest to you. So, so far, it has been mostly CC members that have been on the show, and while it's gotten a lot of views, I really want this show to be about the community. This episode is this is taking a lot of time out of my schedule, so I'm not sure I'm going to keep doing it. Hopefully, we will. I don't mean that to be threatening. I understand that things change, but I want the community to be involved. So please be involved. So on behalf of our guests, Chris and Christopher, thank you for coming to the Observation Lounge. This meeting is now over.